Welcome to the Valseth View.
Hello and welcome back to the Valseth View with Carolyn, Dragseth, and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. Carolyn and Valerie lead a unified consulting firm that blends legal, compliance, and strategic expertise to help organizations strengthen governance and achieve sustainable growth. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what it really takes to build a culture of compliance, not just writing policies, but making sure they work in practice. All right, Carolyn and Valerie, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So many organizations obviously have policies on paper. That's without, most of them do, but implementation can be another story. What are some of the biggest gaps that you see between what's written and what actually happens day to day?
Well, I think when you're talking about any organization, you can have a bunch of policies, and if they're written, like you kind of mentioned, if the actual team doesn't know what they're supposed to do, then they're really of no value to the organization. So I think that gap that we try to reinforce is mostly it's one thing to have a policy. It's another thing to actually have a team that knows what they're supposed to be doing. And it's supposed to be your guidelines or your guardrails of this is what we do day to day within our operations. And so absent that kind of bringing or breathing life into them, it is a little difficult for organizations.
And I would just like to add that a place where most organizations get stuck is they have a beautiful policy and procedure manual, and it's written in very high quality or high tech, high educational level. And you need to make sure that your policies are understandable and that they're easily readable, because if not, that's your first barrier that you're going to encounter. So if you have someone or a department writing your policies, one of the things that they need to be sure that they always keep in mind every time they read a policy, not just when they're creating one, but every time that they read it. Is this understandable? Is this in everyday language? Can someone who is not aware of the process pick this policy up, look at it, read it, and understand what to do?
So it almost is like, because it's a document, if you will, within the procedures of what the company does, the tendency is to use too many technical terms, legalese, or things like that.
Yes.
Got it. That makes sense, that why they would do that, but it also makes a lot of sense why you have to make it more accessible to everyone of all education levels and skill levels and whatnot. Yeah. Valerie, when you evaluate an organization's compliance structure, what signals tell you that leadership genuinely values compliance, and what signals might suggest it's more of a checkbox exercise?
Companies that value compliance and doing things the right way, number one, they talk to each other. And I'm not just talking about executive management to executive management, or even a top level manager to a mid-level supervisor. They talk to people. That's very important, because one of the most important things to ensure compliance is trust. You have to have trust in your organization. You have to have trust in the people who lead you directly on day-to-day issues. And then you have to trust the main leadership who has the vision. And so it's important to have that trust. It's important to communicate. And then in addition to the communication, you're going to be interacting with the employees on a day-to-day basis, hopefully, especially if you're the direct supervisor. You're going to be interacting with your staff, making sure that as they do things, and if there's a teachable moment with compliance, that you utilize it. So, and it also involves in meetings, making sure that the compliance issue is always discussed, and it's not discussed in a manner where it's a bad thing of like, oh gosh, we have to comply with such and such, and it's going to cost this, and it's going to take this much time. That's not part of the conversation, because it doesn't matter necessarily how much it's going to cost and how much time it's going to take. What matters is, are you required to do that? If so, then the answer is we're going to do it. Those are two ways that I can determine if there's a buy-in from corporate management as to compliance and how well they're going to do it. Another thing about checkboxes is a lot of companies have policies. They never look at them. They never train on them, except before maybe an annual review or an outside company coming in, or maybe a corporate office coming in. That's when they do the checkoffs of, okay, we have to do this training. We're going to do it on this day. You have to be here on this day. And then you look at a policy or you look at a process for 5 minutes. That is considered a checkoff list. You're just doing it to be compliant on paper.
Yeah, you're just going through the motions, but not really implementing anything that's real.
Correct.
Carolyn, from a legal standpoint, how much risk does an organization face when there's a policy in place that isn't being followed or enforced consistently?
Well, in the legal sense, it's kind of a legal jackpot for anyone who's going to try to sue your company, because they're going to take a look at your policies and say, hey, you said that you were doing XYZ when in reality you were doing ABC. And so therefore you were negligent or you weren't following your own internal policies. So it creates a big legal problem for an attorney if they represent a company that has great policies, has great things written down in paper, but then if they never enact them, or if, do depositions of individuals, they're unable to recall what the policy is, then basically it's a bonanza for the other opposing counsel, because they can say, you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing.
For companies trying to strengthen internal accountability, what do you feel is the smartest way they could make compliance part of everyone's role rather than more of a department silo, if you will?
There are a couple of things I recommend. The first one is compliance should be part of a performance evaluation that tells the employee how important the company considers compliance when you link it back to their payroll check. And then also it elevates it for everyone to have it in their performance evaluation. That way, there's no discussion or concern that compliance doesn't matter. Keep it in the forefront of the employees at all times. Another thing which should be done is there should be time taken out in, whether it's a weekly staff meeting or a monthly staff meeting. Even if you have quarterly staff meetings in a larger group, you need to talk about compliance in some way. Compliance can be things that you do, and compliance can be things that you don't do. And one of the things that I'd like to mention is understanding compliance means understanding where the rules come from. Are they a regulation? If so, is that a company regulation? Is that an industry regulation? Is that a state government regulation or a federal government regulation? So there's going to have to be, in a smaller company, at least one person, but preferably several different people who have a great grasp on compliance, because you never know what questions are going to come up from employees, and you have to have a pretty good understanding of what's going on as a big picture, and then more specifically as a smaller picture, because someone in finance is going to have to know all of the compliance culture for the company, but also the financial accounting standards. Whereas if you're a case manager, you're going to have to understand what the case management rules are for your profession, in addition to all of the different compliance measures of your company.
Yeah. And just as to piggyback off what you've said, I've seen companies who have made compliance fun, which is an interesting way to kind of help with implementation by doing spot quizzes. And then the employee wins a $50 gift card to a restaurant or something like that. So you're kind of flipping it and taking it from something that could be boring or they don't really want to do, to make it be something that's fun and rewarding for them. So they might even go out and study them on their own so that they can participate in those kinds of incentives.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. I mean, you see gamification a lot within like apps and things like that companies might do, and event planners and things like that. But that's a really good idea to bring that into real life, if you will, as well. Mm-hmm. Culture obviously often starts at the top, whether you're a monstrous corporation, a sports organization, you hear it a lot, or even a small business. Valerie, how do you work with executives or boards to make sure that compliance priorities are communicated clearly throughout the organization?
First off, I want to make sure that they understand what compliance is and what the compliance regulations are that their employees are required to know, because they're going to have a major understanding of them in order to position their company in a way in which to win, in a way in which to succeed. And so once they have that strong understanding of the compliance regulations and what that means and how you enact them, and as I mentioned in the last episode, so much of compliance is education over and over and over again. That's just what it is. And so with the board or executive management, if I were the compliance director and I were sitting on the board as I should be, then I would have a calendar set up in front of me of everything that must be reviewed for the year. And then I would break that down into how it's going to be reviewed. Are we going to do it on a quarterly basis? Are we going to do it on a monthly basis? What information should be provided at this high management level? What information should be provided at the lowest level? And do we need to do several different trainings to make sure that we capture people's understanding of what the compliance regulations are? And then in addition, we're going to talk through scenarios as they come up, because my goal with an executive board or with executive management is, hey, you talk about financial accounting, you talk about hiring, you talk about what's happening in the mechanical department. Compliance needs to be such an integral part of that conversation. It becomes second nature. And then in that way, it does roll downhill, and that the executive management board or the management itself will have those conversations with the mid-level management and teach them what they're learning and teach them how to incorporate that information into their day-to-day activities with everyone.
Carolyn, can you share an example where a company's commitment to compliance helped them avoid perhaps a serious legal issue, or at least mitigate one quickly?
Sure. We did a revamp of policies for a medical supply company. And basically what they were doing was they wanted a review of everything that they've been doing throughout the entire ecosystem and whether or not it met the compliance standards. So we ended up kind of rewriting some of their policies, some of their standard operating procedures, some of their other things like that. And in the course of it, there was a vice president who was just very interested in the entire process. He thought it was neat. He thought it was great that we would tie these things to different regulations. And he took it upon himself to be the communicator or the champion of all of the new SOPs and of all of the new policies. And he would go around and he would spend maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours a day talking with employees, specifically going over things that touched their particular area. So he was kind of verbalizing to them what was already kind of formalized within the policy of the company, but he was giving it to them in real time while they were working, explaining how things work. And subsequently, they had a surprise audit, I want to say maybe a month and a half later. And all the number one comment from all of the employees was, I wouldn't have been able to answer the questions that the auditor was posing unless someone had come and put it kind of like we mentioned at the outset in layman's terms. It was easy to understand. He showed me how to apply it to what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and why it's important. And I think that saved them a lot of accountability, because everybody who was working within the company knew what they were supposed to be doing, and they knew why they were supposed to be doing it that way as well.
Okay. Are there ways that companies can utilize technology, with tools or systems to stay more proactive rather than reactive to situations?
Yes. The important thing is to not make your compliance system complex or hard to understand. The importance is to make it as simplistic as possible while being effective. And the key to everything with compliance is consistency. You're not going to want to teach something today and then not go back over it for a year from now. And so by having different technological programs, and there are a lot of them that are free, that can help you organize policies, organize when you do the training of general company policies, but also when you have to do the departmental required policies. There are different technologies that help you with that.
Well, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that part of the value of leveraging technology is it really helps you operationally because it can track what the individual employee is doing. And I think that that's very helpful because you can send them automated reminders of when their next training is due. You can at a glance pull a report that you can take to executive management and say, hey, 70% of your workforce has met all of the standards that we need for them to do with compliance training. This is the 30% that didn't do it. And maybe they can delve a little bit into why they chose not to. And maybe that might be a cue for them to do some of the things that we've talked about, which is revamping policies, making them easier to understand, things like that. So I think that leveraging technology is important because it then frees up your workforce to do what they're supposed to do. And when they have downtime, they can go in, log into a system and take care of their training. So it's really helpful.
And as Carolyn mentioned, those metrics are so important because remember, the key to compliance is consistency. And by printing out a departmental monthly report, every supervisor knows where their employees are, and they're going to have responsibility for making sure that their direct reports complete those trainings in a timely manner. And then the reason why that is so important is not only internally, but as you get other companies who may want to work with you, or if you have a complaint department and outside people come in and look at complaints, or if you have a lawsuit, then you're going to be able to show not only do you have effective, readable policies which are put into action, you also have proof that you have done the training and that you have followed through to make sure that the learning was achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of tools out there to make things easy and accessible. May as well use them.
Yes.
When an organization is trying to reset or rebuild its compliance culture, is there one practical starting point that tends to make the biggest difference?
I think you got to get executive management on the same page first, because if you don't have buy-in from them, it's going to be a little difficult to get it to the line worker who's out there actually doing your boots on the ground work. And I think that you need to get buy-in at all levels. So I think that it's important to kind of walk through all of the steps that we've already talked about, where you're going to work not only on writing a policy, but also how am I going to make sure that I'm communicating that to the rest of the team.
And I also think that your compliance department plays a huge role in that. An example of what I would do in a previous position is I was responsible for certain types of policy writing, and I would write those policies, and then I was responsible for the training. Well, that training took place by telephone, by Zoom calls. It took place one-on-one in the local office. It took place doing a departmental wide training. I would go to other regional offices and train from a regional basis, because my perspective is this: there are going to be a lot of barriers to people wanting to learn compliance. And so I just accepted from the very beginning that I was going to have to be the one who changed to make sure that the training was received. So I was flexible. One of the avenues I had to train were outside agencies that worked with my company. Well, I made myself available after hours for the board who had to have required training. And you just make yourself available, and you do it because you have to follow up that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, you were probably well suited for the to be in that position now, Valerie. Maybe not every executive or high level person is able to think that way.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that wraps up today's episode of the Valseth View with Carolyn Dragseth and Valerie Clark of Valseth Enterprises. To learn more about how their integrated approach helps organizations strengthen compliance and governance from the inside out, visit valsethenterprises.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Share this episode with someone who could benefit from it. We'd really appreciate it. Guys, I really appreciate you. Carolyn, Valerie, great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.